Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'll be taking a look at two books that got passed on to me by Sean. These are both by Shea Wright, who I know on Instagram as Susan Saran Wrap. Another like straight to ink, automatic drawing kind of guy like me, likes to just pick up a pen and go. So this first book seems to be very much just like a collection of sketchbook work and random doodles and things like that. The other book is more of a narrative book, and it's interesting to see Shea Wright work in both modes because the style is very different, which I understand. Like when I work in different ways and with different tools, it leads to very, very different looks. And so it's cool to see someone else kind of having that same thing happen to them. Like even here, you see he's split open these refill bottles of ink and is using them as an actual ink, which I think is a fantastic idea. Be really interesting to see if you paint just with the magenta, if you scan it and get rid of the magenta channel, if it totally knocks it out, or if that magenta is actually not pure magenta. But I'm not sure. It'd be an interesting experiment. Anyways, I had to read this one here. There's a lot of little one-off cartoon strips where you can see that Shea Wright is just like freeballing it on the page and making a comic, which I really like. This one is like a stand-up comedy routine almost, which is something I've wanted to try to adapt to comics for a while. Like, how could you do that type of comedy in a comic format? Here, it's obvious it's just a guy talking with a mic, but I really like what it says, so I'm going to read it. Practicing religion should be more like masturbating, something you do at home, alone. You feel a little weird about it afterwards. Maybe you share this intimate experience with one or two others, get a hotel somewhere. When you get really into it, have a circle jerk. But if you do it in public, you will be shamed. And the moment your circle jerk kills someone, you don't get to circle jerk anymore. I think that's a damn fine sentiment about religion. Very, very well expressed. Yeah, and it's a damn good bit of comedy too. So I would love to see Shea Wright do a full stand-up comedy comic. Some really fun experiments with form here, like where there's this character that's got a grid over it. I don't know why the character's got a grid over it. And then the comics inside of it seem pretty non sequitur, but just as a formatting thing, I think it's really interesting. Also, obviously, some cool drawings over here. I really like that the grid like gets sucked into the guy's butt crack too, and then you just have the little nutsack there. This is pretty indicative of like the style that you get on the Susan Saran Wrap Instagram, where it's all pretty much just these straight to ink drawings. And then another kind of experiment with the comics form using these abstracted photographs with text and symbols over it. So I think there's a lot of really interesting, there's a lot more going on in here as well, obviously, but there's a lot of interesting stuff in here where you could see an artist just cutting loose and experimenting and generating new ideas and new approaches within their own art practice and within comics. So I think that's really exciting. Then we get a more standard narrative. This is part one of ATP, and you see this woman on the front here raging. Similar aesthetic on the cover, but then on inside it's a very, very different kind of thing. It looks like this is being inked with a brush rather than just picking up like a tech pen and doodling. And it's interesting to see an artist who tends to, as far as I know, tends to work automatically, then work with like, okay, now I gotta actually make this thing look the same over and over and over again. That's something I struggle with. So it's cool to see that Mike has the ability to really go back and forth between both. This story is set up in a world where there's an app that allows people to get hired to go do like bad jobs, to take people out, like a murder app. So here he's saying, I got a request on 6 feet under, a 6 feet request. And it's, what's that, a dating app? No, that's 6 inches. This one is like, oh, we want you to kill this person. So that's kind of the background of this world. We've also got this trainer lady here. She's being set up to go, she's being hired through an app to go do some training for a character. So they all show up together. She shows up to train the person that they're showing up to kill. They're missing their fourth member, so they assume that she's the fourth member as they're riding up in the elevator. That's kind of the setup of it. You get to meet the real fourth member here. You can see this is a totally badass character. And then I don't want to spoil too much of it, but obviously this is going to lead to a big fight scene. And I really appreciate the kind of like Jackie Chan level use of props and stuff in the action. I think there's a lot of good like shape and force work, like directional forces across here with all of the bars and the way the motion's going. So really, really fun fight scenes in this book once it gets going. It seems almost like I forget what that movie's called, Knives Out, maybe, or it seems like a Guy Ritchie type of movie, basically, in terms of this absurd like action adventure story. I think that would be the best comparison to make story wise. So really fun. The story doesn't end by the end of this. It's definitely just part one. So really enjoyed both of these. I really enjoy Mike's work and really enjoy following what he does on Instagram as well. So make sure you give Mike a follow, Susan Saran Wrap on Instagram, and I'm sure through there you can get a web store where you can get these works because they're a lot of fun.